The idea is, most people do a 1 week cruise. That's really what people do. 2 weeks is quite more complicated because the way the itineraries are constructed. This one, you just get on board and you stay there and basically live on board. It's a fantastic idea because all the facilities are there, the dining and the recreational facilities, the gyms, the things you get in a resort. But you wake up to a different view every morning. And that is the joy of your cruise holidays. You unpack once and you see 5 or 6 cities. There are 4 or 5 itineraries. A Western Caribbean, an Eastern Caribbean, and Western Med, and Eastern Med, a Baltic, and up to around the Greenland, and then Alaska. There's about 6 or 7 that almost all the cruise lines do. This is different. It's just bringing you around the world, and you're in your home, and you wake up and you're speaking a different language every day. It's absolutely fabulous.
And of course, for people who are living on board on a very, very long term cruise, and these can go up to for years and years, the lease on these properties are. I suppose the benefit is maybe for people who are retired, and they don't have to hang up maybe about inheritance or passing on property that we do in Ireland, or they've bucket the money. You can kind of just live on board, but you have, as you say, fantastic facilities. You have the best of food, the best of entertainment, and of course, the best of medical treatment. So, you could see kind of retired people, wealthy retired people living out their days in companionship and great luxury.
Yeah, and it's something that comes up every now and again. It's a very interesting thought that I once poured out, and I did it a few years ago. My auntie May loves cruises, used to love cruises, and then she got quite unwell, and time came to put her in a nursing home. It did occur to me that with the price of nursing homes. And the price of long-term cruises, which tumbled there in the aftermath of the global financial recession, that the thing to do would be put someone on one of these huge cruises that goes on for 90 days or 120 days. It's actually cheaper than a nursing home, or it was then. And you have the best of facilities. You've got good food. You've got good company. She loved to talk. And you've got, as you say, you've got the medical facilities on board, really good medical facilities on board. As a long-term living option, it's not something that comes up very much that, people would do this long-term for a couple of reasons. But it's certainly cheaper than a nursing home, and I think it'd be a great idea for someone to take on. We didn't take it on ourselves.
And no energy bills, of course, coming into the winter.
Well,
You'll be waking up somewhere sunny, and they've been looking after that for you. Now, as a concept, of course, like it's not entirely new. There was that
that,
big floating complex out, was it out near Dubai, called the World, kind of reclaimed land, like built to look like different countries. But that was ferociously expensive.
yeah, the reclaimed land and the world. That was sort of where you got different parts of the complex aping different countries, including Ireland. There was also a cruise ship, which was a living cruise ship. It was the first ones to try it out. It's been to Ireland a few times. I've been on board. It's the idea was you'd sell off the individual staterooms. Sometimes I call them cabins because that's what they used to be in the old days. The cruise lines go mad if you call them cabins. But the reality is that your living space, no matter what you do with a cruise ship, and this is where it comes down to the end, your living space is going to be curtailed. And the price of this is $1 million, around 1 million, sometimes more. And the world managed to sell all of their living spaces on board. But what happened really was this was not a floating home or a resort or one of those gated resorts you get in Florida and places like that, which was probably the original concept. It really serves as a second home. People look at the itinerary, they fly in, they join it for maybe a month or maybe 2 months. Then they go back to one of their 7 or 8 homes around the world that they also live in, because you're dealing with people who, for whom money and paying $1 million doesn't really cost them that much thought. And I suspect that's what's going to happen this time around, because what the brochure and the beautiful online photographs that everyone can find very easily, um, what they don't tell you is that space is always tight on a cruise ship. No matter how expensive the cruise, and I've been on really top end cruises that cost about €12,000 a week. you're always going to have to come back to that. You have to fit them on board a ship, and space is a little bit tight. So it's like a tight apartment, high end apartment, best to finish, all those things, beds that fit into the wall, king size beds that would fold up, all of that. But it comes back to space and long term. That's really what probably makes people decide to use it as a second home rather than a first home.
Yeah, although I quite fancy there's a two-story penthouse on board this particular storyline ship. Now it's at bargain price $8 million, but that would probably give you a tiny bit more space. And we saw, I did a report on the Celebrity Beyond, the new cruise ship from that well-known line, and they had two-bed penthouses and kind of large flats, if you like. They probably don't like that word. On board, which are quite spacious, which are really in the upper end of the market. Now, this outfit has said that they have already sold a bunch of these rooms, and they expect to completely sell out 547 properties on board, or houses, apartments, whatever you call them. They're going to sell out at the end of the year. Now, talk to me a little bit about how the leasing arrangement works, because it's like a home, so it's like a leasehold arrangement. Is it similar to what would happen down, say, in a I don't know, a mobile home park?
Pretty much like your caravan park in Spanish Point, except as you say, it comes with 8 million for the penthouse, which the O'Malley's aren't charging. But the reality is that the leasing arrangement is pretty similar to what America. It is okay. The target audience here is American, so it's quite similar to what Americans are used to. And what are Americans used to? They're used to these retirement gated communities in places like California and, as I say, Florida. They come at a price. They then come with the significant fees, which can add up to a mortgage on their own, that come along with it, and also terms and conditions, which sometimes might be a bit intrusive. The reality is that the funding of this ship is that they're expensive to build. Like one of those ships, like the Beyond that you're just talking about, costs something around $1.3 billion to build. And it's a fine ship, and it has its own gated community within the ship. Quite interestingly enough, there's a celebrity for ordinary people, and then there's a celebrity for the mega rich, which is a separate area. But what the cruise ships with the long term stays are doing is financing it on, first of all, paying the capital costs by selling off those 800 odd apartments. And then there will be maintenance and all of those sort of things that go along. So it's quite complicated. Your million isn't exactly going to stop your bills. They are going to continue arriving. But as I say, the precedent for this is that people buy it as a second home, and things like the cost of it, running it, all of that, they don't really worry too much about it. And they pick and choose where they go. There are parts of the world they want to see, there are parts of the world they want to float around in, and they like to live on board for those parts of the world.
Is there a tax advantage? Because one of the groups that this is being marketed at aren't just the retirees with loads of money, it's what they're calling the digital nomad types. And I suppose we're talking here about the dot-com generation, younger people who've made a lot of money but don't want to be based in any one country. And do you think that being in international waters would just encourage that kind of move to something like this living model?
Absolutely, you don't actually have to. You don't. You're not subject to any sovereignty when you're in international waters. It works in a whole load of different areas, including marriages, things like that. It's very important. But some jurisdictions do an awful lot of chasing down of their civilians to make sure that they end up paying tax back at home. And one of the most diligent of those is the United States. There are loads of people who have problems having to live a certain number of days out off the island. And we know in the case of our own super rich in Ireland, there are people who, take flights, fly off the island for particular times of the year so that they don't get subject to tax in Ireland. That's replicated through the 200 different countries of the world. And certainly when you're in international waters, you're not subject to anybody's jurisdiction. There is a problem though. Governments are very good at tracking out some way of taxing you. And it's always a good idea to be paying tax in some jurisdiction or other. Otherwise, they'd start going after the source where your investments are. And we've seen a little bit of that happen since the whole idea of a floating home first was floated, if you don't mind the pun, at the end of the 1990s.
Okay, well, listen, for anybody who's interested, the ship is called the Narrative, and it's bringing its 1,000th day maiden voyage across 6 continents in late 2024. On board, you will find 20 restaurants and bars, a little brewery, 3 swimming pools, a 10,000 foot library, movie theatre, state-of-the-art wellness centre, and a bowling alley. Eoghan, the cruise ships that are available now, I mean, they bear no relation to, say, the ferries we would have gone on years ago, bringing us to France or whatever. They are absolutely extraordinary, aren't they?
Absolutely. There is a cruise for every different type of person. And if I was to sum it up very, very quickly for people who are not familiar with it, there's an entry level cruise, which is generally, there were small old ships that some of Irish people would be familiar with. A lot of them have gone to the Breakers Yard this year. Marco Polo, great favourite with the Irish. Black Watch, great favourite with the Irish. They were based largely upon cruise lines like CMV and Fred Olsen. But now the entry level tends to be the very large ones, and some of them would have 7,000 passengers and 2,000 crew. They're by the likes of Royal Caribbean. You can get very, very good deals on that. Then there's a mid-level, the one you talked about, Celebrity, very plush. They do premium restaurants. You get about 17 restaurants on board. You get a little bit more room in your cabin and very good entertainment. Because you remember, the bigger the ship, the more sense it makes to put on very good entertainment. And then there's a top end, which tends to be a smaller cruise ship. It tends to be the likes of Crystal Cruises and Seabourn and the Europe and people like that. Premium, they're not going for big show entertainment things, but they're quite premium, and they would be the people that have an awful lot of money to spend, don't really have to worry about the bill at the end of the day. There are lots of choices of itineraries. As I say, the Med has 2 different varieties. The Caribbean has 2 different varieties. Alaska, the Baltics, and the Iceland, Greenland. And Asia, Dubai is becoming, more popular, and Asia is becoming more popular. But the real joy of cruises and the big selling point is you unpack once, you're in what is the equivalent of your hotel room, and you're waking up in a different city every day. It's glorious. It's not for everybody, but once you get the bug, people who love to cruise keep coming back.
That's absolutely right. Now, Eoghan, thank you for bringing us up to date. So, any listeners that are interested in buying their second home in the future, and they can look at the Storyline ship there. Now, while I'm still happy, I'm just going to let you go. Eoghan, everything resolved at Aer Lingus at the moment? Any ongoing issues there for people?
The whole travel thing has sorted itself out, right? Not just in Dublin Airport, but right across Europe. A lot of the airports in Germany and France and places that we had problems with all solved, with 2 exceptions. Amsterdam and Heathrow are the 2 airports causing most of the problems. Things running very much as normal. You're going to be checking in exactly as you did before COVID, and the restrictions are all being removed. October the 1st, Germany, flights to Germany won't require masks. Flights to Canada won't require masks. So we're as close with Spain, absolutely as normal, absolutely as it used to be. And that's true of the other EU countries. There will be a local restriction or 2, but generally within Europe, we're back to normal. And all of those terrible problems that we saw earlier in the summer, generally sorted. The 2 exceptions, unfortunately, in Europe are Amsterdam and Heathrow. Still a lot of legacy problems to be sorted out. But hey, it's great and it's worth it when you get out to get to that sun.
All right. Well, listen, Eoghan, Corry, the joy that is cruising and all of that. Thank you very much.
Always a great pleasure.